Hello, and welcome to another Talks at Google. I'm here today with Dawoon Kang, the co-founder and co-CEO of Coffee Meets Bagel. Hi, Dawoon.
Hi.
Hi, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining today to share your story. My name is Juno, as you know. I have the honor of hosting you on behalf of my team at Google, the Online Partnerships Group, and its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. And I also have the honor to represent the Asian Google Network, which is hosting this talk as well in celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. This year's
Awesome.
theme, this year's theme is breaking through together. And I'm excited that we have you, who has personally broken through so many barriers yourself and can genuinely speak to that experience. So to kick things off, would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself and Coffee Meets Bagel to the people in the audience who may not be aware? And that'll be like your history, co-founders, notable network TV appearances, and overall claim otherwise.
Great. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I'm so glad that you invited me to share my point of view and my experience, and really hope that it's going to be helpful and thought-provoking to everyone who's joining. The Asian community, of course, women in tech, but everyone else as well. Okay, so a little background about myself. I'm originally from Korea. I immigrated to the US when I was 13. Yeah, Korea, with my two sisters. Yeah, really just went to high school and college here. And, my parents, like, I come from an entrepreneurial background, family background. So my mom was an entrepreneur, and my dad particularly actually started his business right out of college with his own brother, and which kind of gave the three of us the inspiration to do the same. And so this is something that we actually talked about for, almost since we were little. But of course, being a good Asian, child that children we worked hard, was like really eager to get into really good college, collect different degrees out there and, work for Fortune 500 companies. So did that for many, many years. And then about 8 years ago is when we decided, hey, you know what, like, we always talked about just starting a company together. If we, it feels like if we don't do it now, maybe it's now or never. So, and, among the three of us, we have like 10 plus years of work experience, and we really feel confident that there's something that we can create that can leave a really meaningful legacy to the world. And that was when we decided to start Coffee Meets Bagel. So I started that company with my two sisters. We were in New York at the time, and then kind of moved out to San Francisco because it is the mecca of tech. Yeah, so I'll just pause here for a moment.
Yeah, that's great. Can you give us more background about like how Coffee Meets Bagel is different from other dating apps, and sort of the rise up? I know you had I think most people would be aware that you guys were on Shark Tank, and
Yeah.
that's sort of Coffee Meets Bagel's biggest lighthouse moment.
It was. Yeah, so quick background on Coffee Meets Bagel, and how we landed on dating. So we decided that we were going to start something first, and we didn't really actually have a eureka idea that we wanted to work on. So we started spending time just observing what would be a problem that would be really exciting and interesting for us to solve, as well as a big market and big opportunity. And the dating just kept coming on. And I think because the age that we were at, we were in our late 20s. And of course, all of our friends and family, including ourselves, were dating. And when we looked at the dating industry and the existing kind of players out there, what we realized is that is this interesting insight of how the gender ratio of the dating app participants, it's very lopsided in the heterosexual community. So it's like 70% guys, 65% guys, and 35% women. And when you actually consider the activity level of men and women, men are actually twice as more active on dating apps. And so that kind of phenomenon made things even more lopsided. And of course, that has consequences to the experience of all the participants. Guys are often frustrated because they don't hear back, and women are also overwhelmed. And so we said, hey, I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to create quality and safe dating app that really speaks to women, so that we can actually provide the best experience for both men and women. Now, that was 8 years ago. That's kind of how we started in the beginning. Our vision really has evolved as, I personally grew and my team also grew. And now, rather than focusing on like woman per se, our vision is much more inclusive. It is, we are here, like the world that we want to create is a world where everyone has access to love. I think it's love is something that everyone wants, but and some of us are lucky enough to be able to stumble upon it. Like we don't make any effort and we just find it. But most of us, it just doesn't happen for us. Like kind of in a fairy tale Hollywood movie, it's something that we actually have to actively cultivate and go after. And we, Coffee Meets Bagel wants to be the partner in your dating journey, as far as like, helping you find relevant people, as well as helping you cultivate a good dating practice that'll actually get you to be able to create healthy dating, healthy relationship. And so, yeah, like Shark Tank was one of our biggest breakthrough moments. Because of our focus on long-term relationship, we've been voted many times as, best dating app for women, best dating app for people looking for long-term relationship. We are one of the top grossing on dating apps on Google Play. And so, very happy to contribute some way to the Google community as well. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey.
It sounds incredible. Yeah, dating is painful. I painfully empathize there. Yes, Coffee Meets Bagel is amazing. I've used it. Shout out to my manager and her husband. They used it and found each other there. Yeah, right. I'll give you their email address later for the success story. But
I love that.
you mentioned a lot of things there around sort of breaking through that model minority stereotype. So can you talk a little bit more about being a founder of color, female founder? Your family, as you mentioned, has gone through the experience of immigrating in the United States, and there are a lot of benefits and challenges that come with that. How would you say that experience sort of shaped your mindset as you started that business?
Yeah. Yeah, like now looking back, just so many interesting insights that came out of my experience as an immigrant. And I think it's very easy when you're going through it. It's very easy to just focus on the challenges, and it's only when you kind of look back and having overcome a lot of those challenges, you realize, wow, that really just helped me grow so much and expand my perspective, and like you just become really grateful for what you for the experiences that life kind of threw at you. So I think a couple things that I want to highlight when it came to starting a business as an immigrant. I think when I first started, I was actually very self-conscious about the fact that I was a Asian founder. And because my ambition was to be really able to change the way Americans date across the country and beyond, right, beyond the world. And I think I was a little bit afraid of being the Asian face, and like the mainstream America not being able to relate to it. And it kind of just goes back to similar experiences that I also had in school, in college. I don't know, Juno, if you had a similar experience, but I was never like one of those kids who was like, don't really care if I'm Asian, like, I'm just gonna, whatever, like, it doesn't really matter. But I think I was then too, like, pretty self-conscious about the fact that I look kind of different than the majority of the people here. How do I actually fit in? But I'm going to be really careful not to hang out just with Asian, because I already feel like an outsider, and I don't want to be like labeled even more. And so that was always kind of there. And I think it kind of constrained the way I acted, right? Like I didn't have a freedom to just be whoever or what I wanted to be, because it was kind of like nagging in back of my mind. And so going back to Coffee Meets Bagel, I think there were moments when I even thought about like, maybe I should have a different spokesperson who is white and not Asian, and who can like just in terms of visually could relate to the rest of America more. And so it was definitely challenges. And I think only when I actually started realizing that this is a unique asset, that like I started realizing that, I should really be, it's a heritage that I really should be proud of, that I begin to be able to embrace all the advantages and all the strength that comes with being part of the Asian community, right? Like, so for example, a lot of first customer base of Coffee Meets Bagel were Asians. They used it and had a great experience with it, and they're the one who really catapulted us to, because they talked about it with their friends, right? And and of course we have all kinds of friends, not just Asian friends, right? So that was like the really like a very important element of how our initial growth came from. My first investor actually was Korean American. A lot of my mentors were, and I think what's great about being part of a small community is that we help each other a lot, right? And there's a network that you can really tap into, and there's nothing to be ashamed of for like being able to do that. That's a strength that comes with being part of a community, and I think you should really take advantage of that. And I think yeah, actually, if I look back, how I actually came to kind of completely embrace that, I think it's really easy to think through, because we only can experience our own individual experience. Like all these challenges that comes with being an outsider is something that's unique to yourself. But when you actually think about it, it's a very universal human experience. Like, somebody who's white and like visually just not underrepresented group could feel like an outsider for many, many different reasons. I don't know, like if you come from an athletic family, but you're not athletic, well, you're going to feel like an outsider, right? And so it's a very human experience, and that just doesn't come with whatever identity that you have. And I think once you realize that, you kind of are able to completely embrace it, which is what happened to me.
I don't even ask you the questions. You already teed up perfectly in the segue to my next question. That was really great. I think it's great to see that it aligns with the theme, breaking through together. Asians helped you grow. It was the growth engine for your company, the founders itself as well. I want to kind of relate that to sort of your field of expertise and the Asian experience within dating. So one of the first things that you said was you want to build an app that's for everyone, right? And build an inclusive and equal experience. So, the Asian community, as you're aware, it faces a lot of challenges, and a lot of them take a really interesting shape when it comes to dating, just like East Asian bias, fetishization versus discrimination, et cetera, right? And then other minority groups as well face similar challenges. And an OkCupid study from 2014, you may have seen, it says that we don't really date outside of our ethnic communities. And then there's the conversation of preference versus racial bias. So all that intro being said, as a leader in this space, an important space like dating, how do you take these issues into account personally and for the company and kind of build towards that future of an inclusive dating app for all?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question and very, very important topic that doesn't just address dating, because I think the principle of diversity and inclusion just applies anywhere, like workplace, dating, wherever we are, our communities. And so I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday on points that I wanted to share, and kind of found, and of course, my point of view is based on my own life experiences, so it's not the answer. And I really hope that this is actually going to be thought-provoking more than anything else, so that we can continue this conversation. I think as a dating app creator, and a leader, and somebody who wants to really aspires to change the world, like if we want to bring more diversity and inclusion to anything, including dating, you really have to kind of start with the question of why is that important? Why is diversity and inclusion important? Because without realizing that, all of us realizing that as individuals, it can't happen. Like we can make it into a rule. We can I can include all kinds of options on Coffee Meets Bagel for people to be able to choose. But if people don't make the choices because they don't realize what lack of diversity is costing them in their life and in our organization, in our community, then we're just not going to make the choice, right? And so I think it's first and foremost really, really important to understand what is lack of diversity and lack of inclusion in my life and in my dating life costing me. And so, for example, in dating, I think maybe in the workplace force, like it's there's a lot of conversation around it, and maybe it's a little bit more obvious. Well, access to talent pool for sure is when it's like there's a fierce competition for talent. It's very, very difficult to find somebody who has the exact skill set that you're looking for, is passionate about the industry, very, very good culture fit. Well, if somebody feels marginalized, and because you don't have a diverse work environment and they don't want to be part of it, well, it's just gonna hurt your ability to like have a top talent and high performing team. So that's pretty obvious why, diversity and inclusion is really important, and what it can potentially be costing your organization. I think in dating, same thing applies. Like you as a dater, assuming that your goal is to find an amazing, healthy, thriving relationship. And in the science of dating and relationship, which is, most of us want, and in the science of dating and relationship, what we know, and this has been researched like throughout, like there's so many books and readings that you could do. And so I'm not going to get into it, but it is like a scientific fact. What really matters when it comes to, healthy long-term relationship is emotional security, like emotional security that you have for each other, and emotional security that you're able to create for each other. Well, why? Well, because love at the end of the day is there for us to be able to have that deep sense of belonging and connectedness. That's what love is. And we all kind of need that. That is a fundamental human need. And our partnership with our romantic partners is able to provide that. Not just that, like, of course, all relationships can do that. And romantic relationship is part of it. So it's here to provide you with emotional security. And so it's very important that you actually are able to find somebody who is emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged with you, and you are able to do that vice versa. And once you feel safe, of course, then you can go out and do, explore various different aspects of yourself and the other person. Like the playfulness comes up, adventurousness comes up. Like you feel really completely safe to be naughty. Like that's the foundation of like you being able to act freely, which is very important in a romantic relationship. Well, so then, factually and scientifically speaking, your probability of being able to create that healthy relationship with someone really has nothing to do with a lot of factors like height, college they went to 10 years ago, your current income, their body type, all these factors that we often use to filter out a potential partner really has nothing to do with whether or not this person is going to be emotionally, somebody who's going to be compatible with you long term and who has a probability of being able to create healthy and thriving relationship. So using the same analogy as a talent pool, if you as a dater actually choose to exclude certain, very wide segment of population out there based on certain facts that really don't matter in, ultimately being able to get that healthy relationship, well, you basically have a lot less to work with. And so now your ability to filter for things that really do matter is a lot less. It's significantly undermined because you're starting with such a smaller pool. Like if you have 1,000 people, of course you can curate more. But if you're starting with 10 people, like there isn't really something that you can curate on because the starting off point is so small to begin with. And so I think this is something that's really important for all of us to understand. It's not love is it's a very personal choice and nobody can force you, right? Like we can't have a rule like you need to actually be open to dating everyone. Like we can't do that. And so it really has to come from you. And I think it's very important for all of us to realize when we actually try to exclude too much, what that could potentially be costing us.
Mm. This is remarkably similar to what Google has produced when it comes to workplace high performing teams. It's a two-pronged system, right? You set up you create the awareness with data that says psychological safety is the number one most important thing for a high performing team. It's all that stuff aside, but then also creating a platform to kind of empower these underrepresented groups, right? So I guess part two is what I'm curious about. What has Coffee Meets Bagel done, or you've done, or people in the dating industry have done to kind of, after you get the information out there that psychological safety is most important, how do you get people to be more open to kind of meeting people from different backgrounds or create a forum for that?
Right. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, my personal belief is that like a true inclusion, like our ability to not be biased towards certain groups or have biased against certain groups really can only happen through repeated exposure. And so diversity really is the prerequisite to inclusion. Well, why? Because as human beings, we're like masterful at, it's all about our own survival, right? Like, millions of years, we became hardwired and biologically focused on being able to detect any kind of potential threat that could, compromise our survival. And so anything that feels unfamiliar, anything that feels like whatever is a potential threat. And anything that doesn't feel like me, my group, could be a potential threat. So like, we just cannot even help it. Like our amygdala just lights up, and it's just like a 0.0001 second reaction. And so for us to actually not have that, which is again totally out of our control, it's only through repeated exposure that we realized, oh, actually they look different, but they're basically me. We're the same. They're not a threat. And I think only repeated exposure can bring that, which is why sometimes, like, even if it's artificially created, like that, creating that in safety where diversity is there is important. So we talk about a workplace, like, okay, making sure that when we interview minimum numbers of like people in X group, because they're very difficult to get. And if you don't actually make that effort, you're not going to be exposed to that kind of candidates to begin with. And so, and so of course, whatever bias that you may have for that group doesn't change because you're just not exposed to that group of people. And so I think the same goes for dating. I think you have to be careful because it is a very personal thing. I don't want to make anyone feel wrong for having certain kind of, partner preferences. And I think it's important to realize the information that I share, that it could be potentially costing you something big. At the same time, and also kind of like the approach that Coffee Meets Bagel has taken is like, again, without forcing, but trying to incorporate more exposure to the type of people they might not have thought about as their, the quality that they should have as a potential partner. My partner, I mean, that's great. And so, for example, in our app, we're all about quality and curation. So there is a section called Suggested, which is, whatever preferences you tell us and whatever we think is good for you, like those people are going to show up there. But we also have a section called Discover, where the type of people we surface is a lot broader than what you actually have told us. And based on things that we think could be potentially good for you. And now, of course, again, like, we can't force you to choose those people, but at least you're getting exposed. And sometimes, when you're not, like, let's say you didn't really like anyone that we suggested, well, a lot of people go on to Discover and start browsing, right? And I was trying to get the statistics ahead of this talk, but I actually couldn't get hold of my data scientist, so I couldn't. But a lot of connections actually happen through Discover section. And so a lot of people end up choosing other, bagels, as we call it, bagels who basically, they didn't really say that's what they wanted, but when they saw them, they chose to like them. And just anecdotally, I personally know so many people who actually end up being in a really great relationship through those choices. And so I think just finding a way to expose people to different kinds of groups, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that Discover feature allows you to kind of balance creating the curated experience that they want and the personalization, but also, hey, here's some people that we think you would like, and that kind of opens the doors to inclusion a little bit. That's great. Mm-hmm. Also, congrats to that super cute baby that scrolled across the screen. Yeah, great job, Dawoon. Okay, let's zoom out, actually, if you don't mind, to one of the most unique things going on right now, which is the pandemic, COVID-19. Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, as you're aware, there's a heightened hostility in the US towards Asian Americans during this time. So I'm curious, how have you dealt with this situation personally? And as a leader of a dating company, have you seen it kind of manifest on the app in any way, or in dating in general?
So we haven't. We actually haven't seen that kind of. I personally haven't experienced it, and hopefully I won't. But I know it's kind of out there for it's real, and we haven't seen it like manifest itself in numbers or what I hear from our customers. It's very unfortunate. This kind of goes back to what we talked about. It's like fear, right? Like whatever doesn't look like me and doesn't feel like me, just they're potential threats. So I think it's just really unfortunate. And very important to have discussions like this and also bring awareness to the fact that, at the end of the day, we're all just fundamentally the same, just human beings, like struggling and going through life, trying to make the best out of it. And I think we tend to focus on what is visually different because we're a very visual uh, animals. Like just visually, it's just like that's what you gravitate towards. But again, at the end of the day, like there are so many facets and aspects to all of us as an individual. Sometimes, like maybe visually we're in part of underrepresented groups, but in a lot of other aspects we're not. And so, hopefully, all these conversations will actually bring more awareness to this truth. One thing that we started doing at Coffee Talk that I personally feel really passionate about, excited about, and I didn't do this thinking of diversity and inclusion, but actually kind of is becoming that. Because of during COVID, it's really hard to meet somebody physically. We started, and when you're single and most of us like live on our own, it's especially harder to stay connected with your loved ones, and it could feel really isolating and loneliness exacerbates. So I think it's very important that if you're in that situation, you proactively reach out to meet new people, or like stay in touch with your existing relationships. Anyway, so we started this thing called Coffee Talk, which is a virtual community hangout space. And so we didn't want to do a speed dating because it's a little bit like sometimes there's like a lot of pressure to that, and just wanted to provide a venue for people to be able to come on and connect with each other and just talk about what's on top of their mind, whether it's COVID or whether it's something else, and be able to help each other and like be a part of support each other and know that they have a community that they belong to. They're not alone. And so we started doing this. And what I love about this is because it's a new initiative, we didn't actually have a ton of filters. It was just location and similar age groups. And we put that on because sometimes whatever's on top of your mind is very different. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times based on what life stage you're at. And so there's not a lot of filtering. And so like group of people come together to do that. And I'm moderating. We have a moderator just for safety. And when you help people actually, get things going, sometimes it could feel a little bit awkward to have to start a conversation with like a bunch of people that you don't know. So I'm moderating it myself. And it's just been so wonderful to see people just be able to interact outside of being represented in this two-dimensional profile that is so easy to just swipe off. And when you, even myself, like somebody kind of comes on, they look certain way. And of course, I'm making judgment myself. It's like a snap thing that, again, like it's like a human thing. And then they start talking and I'm like, oh, wow, this person is actually very different than what I expected. And then you realize there's so much depth and dimension to every individual. And I just love being able to expose people to that truth. And of course, a lot of feedback that we get is, I want more curation. I want more like, so that's still there. And we also have to evolve with what customers tell us, but it is one aspect that I've learned to enjoy. I just really, truly enjoy a lot.
Yeah, I've heard CEOs wear a lot of hats. You might be the only CEO who also wears dating moderator as another hat as well.
I love interacting with our users. Yeah.
That's got to change the Coffee Talk dynamic a little bit. Oh, the CEO is here. Like maybe we should tone down these comments a little bit. I'm going to ask maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So if anyone listening on the live stream has a question, feel free to type it into the box on the right. But so it's sort of going away from diversity and just talking about dating in COVID-19. So how do you see the future of dating changing, not just during COVID, but also post-COVID?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that's really interesting that has come up, and I'm not totally sure how lasting this will be. And I think that will depend on the extent to which we actually have to practice social distancing and quarantine, because even if like government lifts that, hey, you don't have to stay at home 24/7 anymore, a lot of us are going to feel a little bit reluctant to go into a bar and go into whatnot, right, until the vaccine comes out. And so depending on how long this lasts, I think it could be a lasting behavioral change, or it may not be. One thing that is coming up right now is that because we're not able to meet physically, you're only able to rely on your ability to carry the conversation to build connection. There is no like physical touch, or you can't hug, kiss, or like, I don't know, like, so you're only able to you rely on conversation to carry the connection. And what's actually really good about that, I mean, it's not good that like that's you have to do that 100%, but kind of going back to what I said about love, first and foremost having to do with providing you with that emotional security. We're all learning to build that emotional intimacy first. And surprisingly, I think, you know, like, because dating, again, we're visual animals, and physical chemistry is a very big part of dating, especially in the early stage of dating. That a lot of us has, I think there has been, in my personal point of view, overemphasis on this physical chemistry thing, which after it kind of dies down, you're then left with still having to build up this emotional intimacy, your emotional connection that you didn't actually invest in the very beginning. And at that time, things may start feeling hollow. Like you thought there was like an intense connection, but it actually wasn't. Um, and then you feel kind of empty, and then like the relationship starts unraveling from there on. And now we're actually having to invest in the building of emotional intimacy first, which is primarily the most important thing when it comes to long-term relationship. And so I think the fact that we're having to invest in that, and we're actually having to learn how to do that, I think is a really good thing. And I think I really am hoping, and this is where I really am trying to get Coffee Meets Bagel to be more active on like this element of education and cultivating good practices for dating. I think I'm hoping that there's going to be more demand for that, more realization of how important that is, and so we can all learn how to be a great dater, um, and so yeah, like we'll see how. Okay. But yeah, let's see how it's a change that I'm hoping that will last. I'm not 100% sure if it will. I think it'll depend on the length of this this COVID thing.
Yeah. You heard it here first. The hi, hello chat on dating apps is officially dead because of COVID-19. You got to be interesting, which is great. Yeah, we got to step up. So many comments coming in, by the way, of people who have met on the app. That's got to
I
be
know, this is so lovely.
it's a really cool feeling. Yeah. You mind if we switch over to some of the Q&A that's come in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What's the biggest barrier you still face today as a female co-founder / CEO?
Oh, thank you for asking that, because I actually really did want to talk about this. But I forgot one of the topics that's really, really important to me, and it's because it's still something that I'm working on, and I probably something that I have to work on for the rest of my life, is the impact of self-limiting beliefs on your potential. And I think this is a topic important and relevant for everyone, but I think it's especially important for underrepresented groups, because there's just so many stereotypes out there that you end up, and when you're young, like you don't actually know what the truth is. And it's very difficult to discern the truth from stories. And I think it's very easy for us, because society is, there's a lot of authoritarian, like people seem to know what they're doing, and people, whatever. It's like your parents said something, your teacher. And so like it's very difficult to discern, and you end up believing a lot of stories that are not true about yourself and about the world, that ends up limiting what you are capable of doing. And so one story that I really love to tell, and I tell this because it's a big regret that I have in my life. Actually, when I was in college, I wanted to be a computer science major. And so I walk into my first computer science class, and then like I stopped myself, because I came from all girls school, by the way. Like I went to all girls high school, and then I walk in there, it's like all guys. They all look like they came out of this like hacker movie. They all look like they know what they're doing, right? And like we look at media and we kind of formulate, oh, this is the truth about the world, right? Yeah. And the only computer scientists I was not exposed to computer scientists in my real life. And so then I'm thinking like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, like those are the only type of people who can actually do computer science. And so then I first, but why I stick around, I do it, I get a C. I worked really hard, but I got a C. And what I didn't realize is that everybody else got a C because this is a weed app class, and they wanted to see how, they who's going to stick around. But because of this stereotype that I had about the world and who does computer science, I ended up just concluding, oh, I'm not good at this. Like, I don't think this is for me. Um, I think it's very easy to attribute the first sign of challenges and discouraging thing to our own identity, and then kind of conclude, I can't do this, which is what I did. And then of course, like, I would never know because I never like, I just exited myself from that. And from all my life experiences, I know that when you work at it, like, everyone, doesn't matter if you're from minority or not, if you're up to something big, and of course you're going to encounter challenges. I mean, there's so many challenges that I encounter on a daily basis running Coffee Meets Bagel, and it's very, I think, easy to attribute that to, like, oh, it's because, like, I'm not good. Well, like, whatever. And so I think it's really important to, and like, when you live a certain way for a long time, it takes time to actually unwind that. And so this is something that I've been working on for many, many years now, and still work in progress. And so I think this, and there are elements of self-limiting beliefs that you might not think you have it, but you actually have it. And so you have to be really mindful and reflective to be able to discover that and actually work on it, because if you're not aware of it, you can't get rid of it. And so I really want all of us, especially those of us who are, in the underrepresented class, to be actively be mindful of this and cultivate it.
That's great. Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecies don't always
Exactly.
have to exist. It's all mental. Yeah. This is a great question. Typical Googlers, we want the stats. You don't have access to your data scientists right now, but maybe even anecdotally, what changes in Coffee Meets Bagel usage have you noticed during the shutdown? Are there changes between geographic areas, for example, areas that are sunnier where optimism is higher? I imagine that is correlated versus rainier. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point that we did not look at. So maybe the homework for my data scientist. Yes, we're seeing very interesting trends. So, and it's been reported, it's not just Coffee Meets Bagel, I think it's dating up across the board. Like, the engagement and chat rate has definitely gone up, well, because people are staying home more, and they're, it's a little bit harder to connect with other, whatever existing relationship that you had. So of course you're on the app more, chatting more. And so I think, especially in cities like New York, and where the COVID has been impacted more, we're seeing more increase. So geographically, it's different than, depending on the severity of the situation. Like, interestingly, for example, in Asia, because Coffee Meets Bagel is global, we actually saw something similar early on in the year. And so, like, because the COVID was hit earlier in Asia, like in January and February, we saw the same thing there. But then it kind of just disappeared as things got better, kind of came back in countries like Singapore. And so the severity of, and our ability to connect easily, or I think, is definitely impacting engagement level. Our sign up also has been impacted on the negative side. And so, of course, like, when you're thinking about your health and your job and whatever else, like, you're not going to be thinking about entertainment or optional, or like making new friends, or your dating life. And so, like, our signups are in the same cities where we're seeing the engagement up, like, we're also seeing the signups going in the other direction. So those are some of the trends that I've been seeing.
That's really interesting. We have 5 minutes left, and this is a quick one. Do you use your own app to find someone?
Well, so I'm with somebody now, so I have a long-term partner, so I don't use it anymore. But I did meet my two ex-boyfriends on Coffee Meets Bagel, and we were together for a year and a half each. It was a really great relationship. Yeah.
Great. This is probably our last question, and this is something you wanted to do. Actually, you mentioned before the talk, but what a date, like, guess this is dating advice, right?
Yeah.
Many of my friends find it challenging to write their own profile. How are you thinking about helping your users represent and express themselves on your app?
So one tip. So I interviewed so many of our users. What are the things that are that you're looking for when you're actually like going through profile? And at that point, like I see a lot of people putting so much pressure on like having the perfect profile, but like I'm here to tell you that that is not necessary, because at this point, like people are not looking for like the Mr. or Miss Perfect at this stage, right? Their bar is like, all of our bar is not that high, because it's just a profile. It's like a very, very, very like the beginning stage of dating, right? So really what they're when I ask like, what are you looking for in a profile? And I see them like, sometimes liking or passing, and I'm like, why do you pass? Why do you like? It boils down to three things. Like people are generally looking for somebody, and vibe is really important. Like I think it's something that you don't really think about. Like you're thinking about but you have to actually, what exactly specific information to put in, but you have to kind of look back and holistically, what vibe am I giving? Well, people are looking for somebody who feels positive. Like nobody wants to, date a Debbie Downer. Kind, like somebody who feels kind, and they're getting these vibes, interpreting these vibes from what you wrote and also what photos that you share. So it's all kind of contributes to that holistic picture. And then someone who seems to be doing at least one thing that's interesting. So you're not a couch potato. You're not going to be sitting around and doing nothing. And so just one thing, but you don't have to be listening to like all the interesting thing that you do. So something that feels interesting. So that's it. Like positive, kind vibe, and you mentioned something that you do that is interesting. Just one thing. That's it, really. And so I think the biggest thing that you could do for yourself is, after you kind of write it, look at the pictures and look at what you wrote and see what kind of vibe it's giving out. And if you can't tell because yourself, ask your friend, hey, what kind of vibe is this giving out? Like sometimes like people just write, for example, like people put on like like shirt, like a shirtless photo because they work out a lot and they think they look good. That's all true.
Oh, those aren't good?
But think about the vibe it's giving out, right? Like it's very easy to think, and you're not there to explain, right? Like we're kind of making snap judgment. It could be like, oh, you want to show off. Well, like think of the vibe it could be giving out to you before you actually decide on what photo or what to say. That I think that would be a really helpful thing to do. And I want to leave people with one last dating tip, if that's okay, Julie, if you have time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which is, so this, I get asked this question a lot. Is how do I actually write something on profile so that I can get liked more? Or like, how do I say something so that somebody would be interested in me? I don't know, how do I, whatever I do so that they would ask me, I don't know, second date. Like I get those questions asked a lot, and these are all very important. And when you think about it, it's really all about like, how do I get liked more? How do I be loved? How can I get somebody to love me? I think if we actually shift our conversation, I really want us to shift our conversation a little bit more towards, how do we be a better lover? How do we love? How do we be more loving? How do I listen to somebody so that they feel really heard? How do I engage with them so they feel really seen? How do I express how much I really admire them? How do I express how much I really think they're a great person? Like if we actually have the courage to be more loving to other people, that whoever you're engaged with, I promise you, your dating life is going to completely transform.
Well, thank you, Dawoon, for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to inspire the audience and for doing your part to eradicate shirtless selfies and the short pie intro opener. Are there any parting thoughts you'd like to share on any of the topics we've discussed? Or also, what are the ways the audience can support you and Coffee Meets Bagel?
Yes. So if you're a dater out there, if you're single and looking to date, and you're interested in long-term relationship, and that's what you're looking for, I promise you, Coffee Meets Bagel is the place you want to be. So please download the app on Google Play. You can also follow us on Instagram, like Coffee Meets Bagel. We share a lot of good dating tips and relationship tips, so that we can cultivate and help people cultivate that, help them become a better dater.
Thank you, Dawoon. It was an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for making this. I think it's a really important topic, and I'm really, really happy to have talked about it so that we can actually get people to think about it more.
I think so too. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.